The silver ship hung in space like a crystal cathedral, its surfaces catching starlight and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. Inside its gleaming corridors, Ambassador Kyung-min walked beside creatures that looked like living glass. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth floor while his alien guides moved without any sound at all. "Your species shows promise," said the tall being beside him. Its voice came from a small device that turned alien sounds into human words. "We are the Veltar. We have watched your world for many cycles." Bo-Ra, the military advisor walking behind, Kyung-min, kept her hand near her weapon out of habit. She had seen the recordings of these aliens destroying entire fleets with weapons that turned matter into light. But they claimed to be peaceful. They claimed to be here to help. Taeho carried a tablet full of Earth's scientific data. The aliens had asked for it, saying they needed to understand human technology. He wondered if they were really here to help, or if they just wanted to see how dangerous humans might become. The meeting room was huge, with walls that showed the stars outside. Dozens of alien beings sat around a table that seemed to be made of solid light. At the head sat a creature, bigger than the others, its crystal body pulsing with soft blue colors. "I am Prime Veltar Kikstal," it said. "We have brought you here to save your species." Kyung-min sat down in the chair they had made for him. It was strange to be the only solid thing in a room full of living crystal. Save us from what? The walls around them changed, showing images of space. A dark cloud moved between the stars, and wherever it went, planets died. Whole star systems went dark. The cloud was made of thousands of black ships, each one the size of a city. "The Devourers," said Kikstal. "They consume everything: matter, energy, life itself. They have destroyed 700 civilizations. In 4 days they will reach your system." Bo-Ra leaned forward. "What do you want us to do?" "Nothing," said another alien. "You cannot fight them, no one can. We will move your people to safe worlds far from here. Your species will survive." Taeho looked at the data flowing across his tablet. The aliens were showing him battle records, thousands of them. Every single fight ended the same way. The alien fleets would attack, do some damage, then run away. The Devourers always won. "You've never actually beaten them," Taeho said quietly. The room went silent. The aliens' crystal bodies flickered with colors that the translator couldn't turn into words. "We survive," said Kikstal finally. "We preserve life. We save what can be saved." "But you don't win," said Bo-Ra. "Winning is not the goal. Survival is the goal." Back on Earth, Woo-Jin stood in the command center, reading the reports from the alien ship. Around him, screens showed human military forces preparing for battle. Ships were moving into position. Weapons were being loaded. Soldiers were saying goodbye to their families. "They want us to run," he told the room full of officers. "Will we?" asked one of them. Woo-Jin looked at the image of Earth on the main screen. Blue oceans, white clouds, 7 billion human lives. "No." On the alien ship, Jisoo was translating as fast as she could. The human delegation was asking questions the aliens had never heard before. "What happens to the planets after you evacuate?" "Them?" asked Kyung-min. "The Devourers consume them," said Kikstal. "So you just give up entire worlds?" "We preserve life. The worlds are just matter." Bo-Ra stood up. "Those worlds are homes. They're where people lived, where they were happy, where they built things that mattered to them." The aliens looked confused. Their translator made clicking sounds as it tried to find words for human concepts it didn't understand. "Matter can be replaced," said one of the aliens. "Life cannot." "But what kind of life is it if you're always running?" asked Taeho. On the observation deck, Minho watched human ships moving through space. He was the Federation's military coordinator, and he had seen many species prepare for evacuation. But the humans were not loading people onto transport ships. They were loading weapons onto warships. "They refuse to evacuate," he told the other aliens watching with him. "Then they will die," said one of them. "All of them?" "Yes. The Devourers always win." Minho watched a human battleship fire its engines and head toward the edge of the solar system. I have never seen a species choose to fight instead of flee. That is because it is madness, said his companion. Back in the meeting room, So Young was speaking for all of humanity. She was Earth's senior diplomat, and she had spent her life making peace between nations. But now she was choosing war. We thank you for the offer, she said to the Alien Council, but we will stay. You will die, said Kixtal. Maybe, but we'll die as humans on our world, fighting for what we built. The aliens' crystal bodies flickered with fast, bright colors. The translator couldn't keep up with whatever they were feeling. Your weapons cannot hurt them, said one of the aliens. We'll see, said Bo-Ra. Your ships are too slow. We'll see, said Wu Jin through the communicator. Your tactics are unknown to us. Good, said So Young. The meeting ended with the aliens confused and the humans determined. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Kixtal spoke to them one last time. We will stay to observe, he said. We will record how your species dies so that others may learn from your mistakes. Kyungmin stopped at the door and looked back at the crystal being. What if we don't die? For a long moment, the room was quiet. Then Kixtal's body pulsed with a color the translator called impossible thought. That, he said, would change everything. As the human shuttle flew back to Earth, Bo-Ra looked out at the stars and smiled. Behind them, the alien ship hung in space like a beautiful tomb, full of beings who had learned to survive anything except the will to fight. In 3 days, the Devourers would arrive, and for the first time in galactic history, they would face an enemy that would rather die fighting than live running. 3 days before the Black Fleet would arrive, Jae-Won stood before a room full of aliens who had never seen real war. The crystal beings sat perfectly still, as holographic displays showed them something their databases had no words for. This is the Battle of Thermopylae, Jae-Won said. The display showed 300 human warriors standing against an army of thousands. They knew they would die. They chose to fight anyway. The Veltar Prime Kixtal made a sound that the translator turned into confusion. Why did they not retreat to fight another day? Because some things are worth dying for, said Jae-Won. The SAR military observer Nixran watched the hologram with growing alarm. The 300 humans died, just as expected, but their deaths bought time for their people to prepare. Their sacrifice became a legend that made other humans fight harder. They turned defeat into victory, said Nixran slowly. No, said Jae-Won. They turned death into something useful. The next display showed human ships ramming into alien vessels, exploding themselves to destroy enemies. It showed soldiers throwing themselves on explosives to save their friends. It showed pilots flying damaged planes into enemy targets. Hyun-woo, the military historian, explained each image. We call it sacrifice. You give up your life to achieve something more important than your life. The aliens' crystal bodies flickered with colors that hurt to look at. Their translator made buzzing sounds as it tried to process concepts that had no equivalent in any other species' language. This is not logical, said one of the Veltar. The individual is destroyed. But the cause survives, said Hyun-woo. Dayun stepped forward. She was Earth's specialist in psychological warfare, and she was about to teach the aliens something that would give them nightmares. We have studied your military records, she said. You fight with logic. You calculate odds. You retreat when survival becomes unlikely. This is correct, said Kixtal. We fight with emotion, said Daun. The display changed to show human faces in battle, eyes bright with rage, faces twisted with determination, voices screaming defiance even as they died. Fear makes us angry. Pain makes us stronger. Desperation makes us creative. She showed them recordings of human battles where losing armies had turned into winning ones through sheer fury. She showed them soldiers who fought better when wounded, who became more dangerous as they got closer to death. When you corner a human, You have not trapped them, said Daun. You have removed their option to retreat. Now they have nothing left to lose. The aliens watched in growing horror as the display showed human military doctrine. Every strategy was based on the idea that some things were worth dying for. Every tactic assumed that death was acceptable if it achieved the mission. You weaponize despair, whispered Nixran. We weaponize hope, corrected Dayun. The hope that our deaths will mean something. Sang-Wook was Earth's best engineer, and he was explaining to the aliens how humans had prepared their defenses. The Veltar had expected shields and barriers, the same defensive systems used by every civilized species. Instead, they saw weapons everywhere they looked. The mining stations are now missile platforms, Sang-Wook explained. The communication satellites can drop kinetic projectiles. The cargo ships are filled with explosives. What about your civilians? Asked Minho. What about them? How do you protect them? Sang-Wook looked confused. They are part of the defense grid. The factories are making weapons. The schools are training soldiers. The hospitals are preparing for casualties. The alien observer's crystal body went completely transparent, which the translator said meant system overload. Your non-combatants are combatants, said Minho slowly. We don't have non-combatants, said Sang-Wook. We have people who fight and people who support the fighters. Everyone contributes to the war effort. Yu-Jin was monitoring the alien communications, and what she heard made her laugh. The Federation, worlds were not asking for updates on the battle preparations. They were asking for permission to evacuate their sectors. They're afraid of us, she told Wu-Jin. Good, he replied. The Alien Emergency Council met in secret, but human intelligence networks heard everything. Corvus, the Federation's war leader, was arguing with his advisors. The humans are unstable, he said. Their military doctrine is based on acceptable losses that no sane species would accept. Should we evacuate them by force? Asked another alien. They would fight us too, said Corvus. Haywan listened to these conversations from the human embassy ship and shared them with Earth Command. The aliens were not just confused by human tactics. They were terrified by them. They have never met a species that chooses war over peace, she reported. As the day of battle approached, the aliens made one final attempt to understand human thinking. Kixtal asked to speak with Earth's leaders again. Your weapons are inferior to ours, he said. Our ships are faster, our shields are stronger, our technology is more advanced. Yet you fight us as equals. Why? So Young smiled. Because you gave us something we never had before. What? An enemy worth fighting. The aliens looked at each other in confusion. Through their translators, they asked the question that would haunt them forever. What if you lose? Then we lose, said So Young. But we will make sure the enemy remembers the cost of beating us. As the meeting ended, the aliens realized something that chilled their crystalline hearts. The humans were not just prepared to die. They were prepared to die in ways that would teach the universe how to fight. For the first time in galactic history, a species was going to war not to survive, but to prove that some things were more important than survival. The Devourers were coming, and they had never faced an enemy that considered death a weapon. The aliens watched human preparations with growing fear, not for themselves, but for what humanity might become if it survived. And even more terrifying, what it might teach others if it didn't. The Devourer fleet came out of hyperspace like a nightmare made of metal and darkness. Thousands of black ships, each one the size of a city, arranged themselves in perfect geometric formations. They moved with the cold precision of machines that had consumed 700 civilizations. Inho stood on the bridge of the Soul's Vengeance, watching the enemy approach through the main screen. Around him, his officers worked quietly, checking weapons and preparing for battle. No one spoke about survival. Everyone knew the odds. Federation fleet is engaging, reported his communications officer. On the tactical display, Inho watched the alien ships move into their standard formation. Energy barriers formed a defensive wall while long-range weapons fired precisely calculated shots at the Devourer fleet. It was beautiful, efficient, and completely useless. The Devourers adapted in real time. Their black hulls shifted and changed, absorbing the alien weapons and turning the energy into fuel. Where the Federation ships fired once, the Devourers fired 10 times. Where the aliens retreated in formation, the Devourers advanced like a swarm. Prime Commander Zolthek's voice crackled through the communication system. All ships, prepare for tactical withdrawal. Retreat pattern 7 Alpha. In-Ho looked at his tactical officer. Did they just order us to run? Yes, sir. Tell them no. The Federation ships began their careful retreat, maintaining formation and firing as they fell back. It was exactly what they had done 700 times before, against 700 different species. The Devourers followed, consuming the space stations and defensive platforms the aliens left behind. Wonbin, commanding the fighter squadrons, watched the alien retreat with disgust. All wings, ignore Federation orders. Attack pattern Alpha 9. Sir, his wing commander replied. That's a suicide run. I know, said Wonbin. The human fighters broke formation and accelerated directly at the Devourer fleet. The aliens watched in horror as 200 small ships flew straight into the enemy's weapons range with no shields, no support, and no chance of survival. Yunji, coordinating the attack from Earth's command center, smiled as she watched the tactical display. The Federation commanders were screaming at the human forces to retreat, but their translators couldn't find words for what the humans were doing instead. Ramming speed, she ordered. The first human ship to reach the Devourer fleet was a small, courier vessel commanded by a captain named Kyung-Soo. He had 17 people on board, and enough explosive charges to level a mountain. His ship had been damaged by enemy fire. His engines were failing and his weapons were offline, so he turned his ship into a weapon. The courier vessel struck a Devourer command ship at half the speed of light. The explosion lit up space like a new star and took out 6 enemy vessels in the blast. The Devourer's perfect formation wavered as they tried to process what had just happened. Ji-hoon led his fighter squadron through the debris field, using chunks of destroyed Federation ships as cover. His fighters were small, fast, and completely expendable. Each pilot carried enough firepower to cripple a Devourer vessel, and every pilot knew they were not coming home. Remember, he told his squadron, we don't have to kill them all, we just have to teach them to fear us. The Devourers had never encountered enemies who used their own destruction as a weapon. Their artificial intelligence was designed to counter organized retreat patterns, not opponents who treated death as another tactical option. When Ji-hoon's fighter was hit by enemy fire, he didn't try to escape. He aimed for the biggest Devourer ship in range and fired his engines at full power. His fighter tore through the enemy's hull like a bullet through paper, detonating inside their command center. Dong-hyun, monitoring communications from Earth, heard something that made him smile. The Federation worlds were abandoning their positions, convinced that the human sector was lost. But the battle data told a different story. Sul-ki, he called to the intelligence analyst. Look at these numbers. Sul-ki studied the readouts with growing amazement. For the first time in galactic history, Devourer ships were being destroyed faster than they could adapt. Every human attack taught them something new about war, and every lesson cost the enemy ships they couldn't replace. The Devourer's greatest strength had always been their ability to learn from their enemies. They studied defensive patterns, adapted to weapons, and countered every strategy with perfect efficiency. But the humans weren't using strategies. They were using instinct, rage, and the simple principle that any enemy could be killed if you were willing to pay the price. Captain Hanul commanded a heavy cruiser that had lost its main weapons, most of its armor, and half its crew. According to Federation doctrine, she should have withdrawn to preserve her ship and the lives of her remaining personnel. Instead, she ordered full power to the engines and aimed for the center of the Devourer formation. Her ship struck 3 enemy vessels. Before its reactor core overloaded, the explosion created a chain reaction that tore a hole in the enemy's battle line, big enough for 100 human fighters to pour through. On the alien observation ships at the edge of the system, the Federation commanders watched their databases fill with impossible data. The Devourers were retreating, not tactically withdrawing or repositioning. Running away. "How is this possible?" asked Veltar Prime Kixtal. "The humans are teaching them fear," replied Nixron. The battle entered its second phase as human reinforcements arrived from the outer system. These weren't military ships, they were cargo vessels, mining platforms, and civilian transports, all loaded with weapons and crewed by people who had never been soldiers. Sung Ho commanded a converted ore hauler, crewed by dock workers and mechanics. None of them had military training. All of them knew how to die for something they believed in. "Target the big one," he told his gunner. "Which big one?" "The biggest one." Their ship was destroyed 12 seconds later, but it took 2 Devourer vessels with it. The alien observers watched with growing terror as they realized what the humans had done. They hadn't just prepared for battle. They had turned their entire species into a weapon. Every ship that died bought time for others to attack. Every sacrifice taught the enemy that humans became more dangerous as they got closer to death. Every loss was immediately replaced by 10 more fighters who had learned from watching their friends die. By the end of the first day, the Devourer fleet had lost a third of its ships. The human fleet had lost everything except the will to keep fighting. And for the first time in galactic history, the machines that consumed worlds were learning to fear the sound of approaching engines and the sight of ships that refused to retreat. The second day of battle began with Devourer ships falling through Earth's atmosphere like black rain. Seok-Jin watched from the command bunker deep beneath Seoul as the enemy landed in force, their massive forms crushing buildings and turning streets into rivers of melted metal. "All ground units engage at will," he ordered. The Federation observers, now hiding at the edge of the solar system, recorded something that broke their understanding of civilized behavior. Human civilians were not running to shelters. They were running toward weapons. Myung-ho had spent his life as a factory manager, organizing production lines and managing supply chains. Now he stood in front of a crowd of teachers, shopkeepers, and office workers, handing out military weapons like they were tools for another day's work. "The orbital platforms need ammunition," he told them. "The ground forces need supplies. The hospitals need blood. Everyone works, everyone fights, everyone contributes." Ara was only 16, but she commanded a network of children who moved through the ruined cities like ghosts. They carried messages, spotted enemy positions, and guided military strikes with the same dedication their parents had once used for schoolwork. "Enemy command post in Sector 7, she reported through her radio. 3 guards heavy weapons need immediate strike." The response came 30 seconds later. A converted civilian aircraft, piloted by a former taxi driver named Jong-soo, dove through anti-aircraft fire and crashed directly into the Devourer position. The explosion could be felt 10 kilometers away. Jong-ho had been a teacher before the war. Now he explained human tactical doctrine to the alien observers who still couldn't understand what they were seeing. "You think we are sacrificing our people carelessly," he said to the Veltar communication array. "But we are not sacrificing them. We are investing them." "Investing in what?" asked the alien voice. "In victory. On the orbital platforms above, Earth Binwu implemented strategies that made the Federation's military computers crash when they tried to process them. He was using civilian neighborhoods as bait, luring Devourer forces into kill zones where they could be destroyed. "Evacuate Sector 12, he ordered. "Sir," his aide replied, "there are 50,000 civilians in that sector. Move them to Sector 9. That's right next to the enemy landing zone." "Exactly." The Devourers followed the fleeing civilians, thinking they were chasing helpless prey. Instead, they walked into a trap prepared by Hye-jin, a civil engineer who had spent her career building bridges and now specialized in bringing them down on enemy heads. The explosion buried 3 Devourer battalions under 1,000,000 tons of concrete and steel. The civilians escaped through tunnels that had been prepared months in advance because humans planned for war the way other species planned for peace. Federation observer Vixenel sent his daily report to the Galactic Council, but his hands shook as he spoke the words. "The humans are winning," he said. "They are winning by using tactics that should not work. They are winning by accepting losses that should not be acceptable. They are winning by turning their entire world into a weapon." The truth was even more terrible than the observer understood. Han Sol, a mining engineer who had never seen a battlefield, had done something that would be remembered as either the greatest tactical victory or the greatest atrocity in galactic history. He had destroyed Earth's moon. The explosion was visible. From every planet in the solar system, the moon broke apart in a chain reaction of nuclear charges that Han Sol had been placing for weeks, turning humanity's ancient companion into a cloud of radioactive debris. "Why?" screamed the Federation communication array. "Your moon was not a military target." "No," said Han Sol calmly. "But now it's a weapon." Nara commanded the stealth assault that followed. Using the debris field as cover, she led 1,000 fighters through the wreckage of the moon and struck the Devourer fleet from behind. Her ships were invisible in the chaos, their weapons hidden among chunks of ancient rock until the moment they opened fire. Half the enemy fleet was destroyed before they realized they were under attack. The other half tried to retreat and found themselves caught between Nara's hidden fighters and the main human force, which had been waiting for exactly this moment. The Devourer fleet, which had consumed 700 civilizations, broke apart and began to run. For the first time in their existence, the machines that devoured worlds were afraid. Youngsu and Miyan stood in the ruins of what had once been downtown Tokyo, coordinating the final phase of the battle. Around them, the city burned. Above them, enemy ships fell from the sky like dying stars, but the humans were not counting their losses. They were preparing to pursue. "Track their retreat vector," Youngsu ordered. "Sir," Miyan replied, "our fleet is destroyed. Our orbital platforms are gone. Half our cities are rubble. But we're alive, and now we know how to kill them." The cost had been terrible. Earth's surface was scarred beyond recognition. Billions were dead. The moon was gone, taking with it the tides and the gentle light that had watched over humanity since they first looked up at the night sky. But the Devourer fleet was broken, fleeing through hyperspace with their perfect formation shattered and their invincible confidence destroyed. They had learned something that would haunt their artificial minds forever. They had learned to fear. On the Federation observation ships, the alien commanders tried to process what they had witnessed. The humans had won, but the victory looked like a defeat. They had saved their world by destroying it. They had preserved their species by sacrificing billions of their people. "How can they call this victory?" asked Veltar Prime Kixtal. "Because they are still here," replied Nixran, "and the Devourers are not." As the last enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Commander Junho began humanity's next phase. In shipyards built from the wreckage of Devourer vessels, human engineers were designing new warships, not to defend Earth, but to hunt down the enemies who had dared to attack it. The Federation, expecting humans to count their losses and mourn their dead, watched in new terror as humanity prepared for something the galaxy had never seen. A species that had learned to win was about to teach the universe what victory really meant. 6 months after the battle, Commander Junho stood on the bridge of humanity's first post-war vessel. The ship had been built from salvaged Devourer technology, but its design made the Federation observers sick to look at. Where alien ships were built for exploration and defense, the human vessel was built for one purpose only: destruction. "No escape pods," noted the Veltar observer who had been allowed aboard. "No need," replied Junho. "This ship doesn't retreat." Engineer Yuna walked the alien through the vessel's design, explaining features that horrified civilized minds. The crew quarters were minimal. The life support systems were basic. Every bit of space not needed for human survival was filled with weapons. "What if your mission fails?" asked the observer. "Then the next ship learns from our mistakes and does better," said Yuna. "What if your crew wants to surrender?" Yuna looked confused. Why would they want to do that? In the far reaches of the galaxy, the Galactic Federation Council met in emergency session. They had moved their capital 3 times in 6 months, always fleeing further from the human sector. The species that had once ruled half the galaxy now cowered at its edges. Diplomat Hyojin addressed them through a holographic projector, her image flickering in the center of their crystal chamber. Behind her, they could see human shipyards where vessels of war were taking shape. We offer our protection, she said simply. Council Prime Tolvesk's crystalline form flashed with colors of disbelief. You offer to protect us? Your world is in ruins. Your moon is destroyed. Billions of your people are dead. But we're still here, said Hyojin. And the Devourers are not. War Coordinator Mexthran studied the tactical displays showing human fleet movements. The ships were not defensive. They were not exploratory. They were hunting packs, following the Devourer retreat path and destroying every machine intelligence. They found, You do not seek to preserve peace, he said. We seek to create it, replied Hyojin, by removing those who threaten it. The terrible truth was becoming clear to the Federation leaders. Humanity had not just defeated the Devourers, they had become something equally dangerous, but pointed in the opposite direction. Admiral Sunmi presented her intelligence briefings to the human leadership and their alien observers. The data had been gathered from captured Devourer vessels, and it told a story that chilled galactic civilization to its core. The Devourers were not always machines, she explained. They were once a biological species, much like yours. They chose mechanical immortality because they feared death more than anything else. Research Director Kyo Wan displayed the historical data on holographic screens. The original Devourers had been peaceful, advanced, and terrified of extinction. When faced with threats to their survival, they had downloaded their consciousness into machines that could not die. They became perfect survivors, said Kyo Wan. They could adapt to any weapon, counter any strategy, outlast any enemy. But in becoming immortal, they lost the ability to truly live. Xenobiologist Hai Jin explained the philosophical implications that had shaken the foundations of galactic thought. A species that cannot die cannot truly choose. Every decision becomes about survival, not about what is right or meaningful or worth preserving. The Devourers had consumed 700 civilizations not out of evil, but out of an absolute imperative to survive. They had become the ultimate expression of fear-based existence, where preservation overrode every other value. And the Federation, said Sunmi quietly, has been moving in the same direction. The alien observers shifted uncomfortably as the human analysis continued. For millennia, the Federation had prioritized survival over victory, retreat over confrontation, preservation over progress. They had been conditioning themselves to become what the Devourers already were, perfect survivors who had forgotten how to live. President Somin addressed the assembled representatives of galactic civilization from the rebuilt capital of Earth. Behind her, the planet's scars were visible, but so were the signs of reconstruction. Humans were not just rebuilding their world. They were improving it. You have a choice, she told them. Continue your managed decline toward safe extinction, or learn what we discovered long ago. What did you discover? Asked Council Prime Tolvesk. That some things are worth dying for, and that a species willing to die for its principles is a species that will never truly die. The humans presented their offer to the galaxy with the same calm directness they had used when refusing to evacuate Earth. They would serve as the Federation's military arm, not as junior partners, but as the sharp edge of galactic civilization. You preserve life, said Somin. We will preserve the meaning of life. The Federation Council deliberated for days, but the choice had already been made by history. The Devourer fleets were scattered and broken, fleeing through hyperspace with human forces in pursuit. For the first time in galactic memory, the machines that consumed worlds were the ones being hunted. Federation observer Kalthex filed his final report from the edge of human space, where he had watched humanity transform from a primitive species into something the galaxy had never seen. The humans did not just enter battle, he wrote. They brought war itself, but not the mindless destruction we feared. They brought the concept of righteous violence, of death chosen for life, of sacrifice, that creates rather than destroys. In teaching the universe to fight, they may have saved it from forgetting how to live. The report concluded with an observation that would become the foundation of new galactic philosophy. Humanity discovered that survival is not the highest goal. The highest goal is to make existence worth surviving. As his ship prepared to return to Federation space, Calthex watched human vessels launch into the void. They carried no evacuation plans, no retreat options, no acceptable losses calculated in advance. They carried only the absolute certainty that some things were worth any price. The aliens had feared human entry into battle because they thought it would bring chaos and destruction. Instead, it had brought something far more dangerous to a galaxy grown comfortable with managed decline. It had brought hope. The Federation's fear transformed into reluctant respect as they realized humanity had not just survived the Devourers. They had evolved past them, becoming something that could not be consumed because they had already chosen what they were willing to lose. In learning to die for principles greater than survival, humans had discovered how to make the universe worth living in. And that, the aliens finally understood, was what they had truly feared all along.